Hello, I'm Dulith Herath, the founder of Kapruga.com. ලංකාවේ e-commerce කියන කැටගරි එකේ ඇත්තටම මුලින්ම පටන් ගත්ත වෙබ්සයිට් එක තමයි Kapruga and then the largest e-commerce organization එක. When you say it's e-commerce, most of the people only see the website, but there's so much behind the scenes. So I have hundreds of staff working for us in the fulfillment center, in the products department, in the marketing departments, in the technology, in the search, in the AI that we use. So ඇත්තටම මෙතන behind the scene ලොකු operation එකක් යනවා. ඒක 24-hour operation එකක්. අන්තන්නේ අපි මුළු අවුරුද්දටම එක දවසයි වහන්නේ මයි පළවෙනිදට විතරයි. අනිත් හැම දවසම 364 days a year we work 24 hours. අපි 2019 කරන ලොකුම දෙයක් තමයි ලංකාවේ පළවෙනි e-commerce fulfillment center එක හදනවා. ඒක ඇවිල්ලා මිරිහානේ තියෙන්නේ. එතන ඇවිල්ලා fully automated e-commerce center එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ products හැම දෙයක්ම robots ලා මගින් supervise වෙලා sort කරලා deliver වෙන මට්ටමකට ගන්න තැන. අපේ dream එක ඇවිල්ලා ලංකාවේ තියෙන රීටේල් ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි එකකින් අඩු ගානේ 5% නැත්නම් 6ක් 7ක් වගේ ගානකට එනකන් e-commerce කියන එක ව්‍යාප්ත කරනවා.
Hi everybody, my name is Lahiru Pathmalal and I'm the CEO, co-founder of Takas.lk. I'm also a board member at People's Bank and a board member of the Sri Lankan Angel Network. My day-to-day job is being the CEO of Takas.lk. I am helped by my two co-founders, Dilendra Vimalasekar and Mutta Musaji. I also have an incredible team which helps us to essentially deliver products from our office in Bambalapitiya to across Sri Lanka. Some of our products actually go to even countries like Australia, US and Europe. I'll be thrilled to share my experiences and life journey on this show this evening with you all.
From the Cubicle.
How did you know when you had the right idea?
You don't know actually whether it's right or it's the right idea or not until you actually start on it with a pure gut feeling, and then slowly by step you validate that idea. So honest answer is actually you really don't know when you start whether it's the right idea or not.
How did you know when you had the right idea?
Well, you have ideas all the time, so you don't know whether it's right or wrong. In my business, we essentially look through as much data as we can in order to figure out whether it's right or wrong. And sometimes you're just wrong and you just have to go back to the basics. So you sometimes go with your gut feeling, but it's also very important to validate your ideas before you execute.
How do you plan on growing your business?
There is every day you need to plan on growing your business. If you don't plan on that, you can be the best brand or all the money in the bank, all that, but still there's a high chance you'll fail if you don't plan on growing your business on a daily basis. So what we do is really, when it comes to e-commerce, we try to let the market demands come to us very clearly all the time. What is the market demanding on e-commerce? What are people trying to buy online? Is it clothes? Is it the obvious electronics? Or is it the niche that is now coming up like jewelry and fashion, things like that? So we let the market demand really drive our growth.
We plan on growing our business every day essentially, but we also look at a short to medium to longer term approach as well. I think when we got into e-commerce, e-commerce was a relatively new thing. So essentially we needed to plan in order to figure out how to make Sri Lankan consumers buy online as a first touch point. So the idea is in a business like ours, in a market like Sri Lanka, we can look at more mature markets in terms of where this business has flourished, learn from those best case scenarios and make it a Sri Lankan experience for the Sri Lankan consumer.
Did you experience failures? If so, what did you learn from them?
If you didn't experience failures, there's something wrong. Yeah, especially when it comes to an entrepreneur, failures is a day-to-day affair. Like it's almost like having your morning cup of tea. You know, you're prone to have some failures during a week's worth of affairs. So it's all about how you look at the failures and how far you let the failures grow. So if you know something is failing, how much is of your tolerance? Are you going to let it fail and try to learn from it, fix it, keep going for a month, a week, a year? That is where the power to, or the ability to give up comes into play. So when there is a failure, you need to be able to decide, okay, am I going to fix this and go forward? Or am I going to I've tried enough now, I need to give up. I have to have the courage to give up and start a different path, for example.
Experience failures all the time. Experiencing failure is also, I think, a part and parcel of life. And in terms of our business, since we're trying something new all the time, we essentially fail more often than not. But in the longer term, the idea is to essentially have more successes so you can make the business grow. And to add to it, I think it was Winston Churchill who once said, success is essentially going from one failure to the other without any loss of enthusiasm. So I think at Takas we essentially do the same thing.
What was your mission at the outset?
I think at the Kapruka's mission at the outset was to be really deep-rooted in e-commerce in Sri Lanka. Kapruka itself is a tree, so actually from the beginning I always looked at it like more than growing the branches or the fruits of it, really to grow the roots into the country. That is why we started Grasshoppers, that is why I started Global Shop, Amazon selling through cross-border. All those things are really deep-rooted in the Kapruka e-commerce journey into the country.
The mission on the outset was to essentially get Sri Lankans to buy online. And we saw ourselves at that early stage as a company who was a Sri Lankan company selling for Sri Lankans. So, and it's with that notion that we ended up bringing in essentially both products as well as facilities, easy payment schemes, cash on delivery, and so on and so forth, which has been embraced by everybody in the online world. So essentially, what we set out to do was to essentially give Sri Lankan consumers another avenue to buy and a greater transparency in terms of pricing, depending on what you buy and so on and so forth.
From the Cubicle.
What do you look for in an employee?
I look for two primary things. First, have to have a great attitude. I mean, from the way you walk into an interview, or how annoyed you are for waiting in the lobby for 3 hours for an interview, that attitude is ultra important. And once you get past the attitude piece, second thing I look for is really the IQ. We have multiple IQ tests from all the grades at Kapruka and all the other companies that I work with. So again, to summarize, it is really the attitude of an employee and the IQ. Those are the two primary.
What I look for in one of our team members is essentially the ability to operate as a team. So when we take people at Takas, we are looking at people who can play a team game, because essentially we are a very small team or a company right now. So everybody has to essentially help each other out when needed. So that comes down to attitude, this ability to open yourself up. So the idea is, in order to help oneself, you have to help others. And you are as strong as the weakest link at Takas. So that's one of the first things I look at. One of the things I don't particularly like is very talented people who might be just maybe a little bit selfish and so on and so forth, because they can destroy team culture. So the one thing which we are looking at is team players and people who want to learn new things. If we find that in somebody, we essentially try to get them on board.
What is unique about your business?
In e-commerce, I think what's unique is for each e-commerce company is at the end of the day, it's the brand. I mean, if you ask what is unique about an iPhone, right? You cannot start mentioning features. Your mind immediately goes and settles at the brand. If you ask what is unique about a BMW or a Mercedes versus a Toyota Corolla, suddenly your mind goes and stands at a brand. So I think at Cubicle we spend a lot of time protecting and really shining that brand, because it is a myth that e-commerce consumers are not brand loyal. Actually, they are brand loyal if you do the branding right. That is why Amazon is out there today.
I don't think there's particularly anything unique about Takas, but what we think at Takas we do is we do a lot of small, simple things correctly all the time. So for anybody to get a product delivered to their home at the best possible price, you need a set of processes to work very well together. That includes both technology as well as people. So that ability for us to do that time and time again, day in and day out, is what makes, I think, to me, Takas very special, the dependability of it. So that in some ways makes us unique, but in some ways it's also not very unique.
What made you choose this type of a business?
I'm an entrepreneur by my DNA, I think. And there are different types of entrepreneurs, and I feel that I was always a tech entrepreneur. So when you are a tech entrepreneur in today's world, you end up doing something digital. So it also, when you are digital, what is the biggest thing going on these days are the digital services and e-commerce. So that is how I kind of pivoted and ended up anchoring myself as an e-commerce entrepreneur, and that has really delivered. And it's really great to be one of the top players of that in a country. So you cannot do that in certain countries. For example, if you go to India or even if you go to the Europe, etc., it's very hard to be number 1, 2, 3 of that industry. So I rather had that luck to start Cubicle at the right time, so we are at the top.
In terms of starting Takas, I have 2 other co-founders, Dilendra Vimalasekara and Muttasa Musaji. I was in the policy field, and one of my friends actually told me at that time I would never get hired in the corporate sector in Sri Lanka. At the same time, I was reading on starting businesses, and one of the key stories which came out was that if you solve somebody's problem in terms of a need, you essentially have a business. And at that time, I strongly felt that we could obviously have more e-commerce players in the Sri Lankan market. And I had 2 ready team members who were willing to kind of join me on that endeavor. So I wanted a change of career. I didn't think I was going to be employed by a corporate giant in Sri Lanka at the time. Plus, I felt that by starting Takas, we can essentially solve the problem. So all those combined, I think we started on the Takas journey.
If you had one piece of advice to someone just starting out, what would it be?
I always tell upcoming entrepreneurs that not only that they need to believe in the idea, they need to really fall in love with the idea. Falling in love is a big term, right? So, liking something and wanting something and falling in love with something is different. So if you really, really fall in love with this idea, you go to sleep, thinking about it, you wake up in the morning thinking about it. That's when you really have that idea in your blood. And investors and your partners and your team starts to see that your boss is really believing and loving this idea, and the founder of this company is absolutely hooked. So that's a very important piece that any startup or an upcoming entrepreneur must have from the beginning. So therefore he can have a whole team that believes him. Always believe an entrepreneur is much taller person. He or she should be able to see much further than the people who is around you. So you can make the people around you really believe in what you are seeing, but which they cannot see.
One piece of advice, just starting up, I would say just do it. You'll learn so much about life no matter what the outcome is.
From the Cubicle.
What do you know of each other as a business personality?
So, Lahiru, when I first got to, kind of externally get to know him, I saw him as another, new kid on the block into e-commerce. And I always had this attitude about, okay, more the coffee shops down a road, more people are going to come to that road to drink coffee. That was always the theory. And I always looked at the retail market as our competitor. So it was never like that, competitor, hostile kind of, that was never there with me. And so I kind of looked up to people like Lahiru for helping, build this whole e-commerce ecosystem up and up. So I've been a fan of him, since he started 7 years back.
Thank you, Dulith. For me, Dulith was a larger than life figure even when we started, and that has continued. I think when we started Takas, we definitely benchmarked Takas to Cubicle. And I can remember all the first pitches we have done, we would have badmouthed Cubicle on the page saying, we can do this job better. But the reality is, he was Cubicle, and Dulith was, before we entered into the market, these guys have done it 10 years before us. So that's who I knew Dulith as. The first time I think we met, one of the first times we met was actually we were supposed to go for an interview, and I was lost. I was walking around the road somewhere in Nugegoda, and Dulith pulled over and gave me a ride to the place.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that was our first encounter.
What advice would you ask or tell the other?
Okay, so I would tell Lahiru to really get into categories that will give him more gross margins. When in e-commerce, that is something that we always did, and I kept a lot of discipline. That's why, he sells TVs, he sells iPhones, he sells something. I try no, these categories. But let's sell 2 40-footer containers of handbags at 60% gross margin. So I think looking at his business model, the brand value is already there. So when people try to buy online, it's like just buying online is the tagline, or what you buy online can be yours to decide, right? So I think my advice would be get into more high margin categories.
And thank you. And I think we've learned this. I think you mentioned this many times when you started. I was skeptical at first because our business was based on growth, and we were okay with low margins. But I was just telling him before we started this section, finally we have margins on all these products, and our bottom line has improved. So that advice is we should have taken it a lot earlier. In terms of Cubicle, to be honest, there's not a lot I can tell them. I guess because they've gone in deep, so they're going into logistics, which I think is the next big thing in terms of e-commerce, really. And I've been always told not to get into this, but I'm fairly bullish on this, and I think they all already do this a little bit in terms of remittances. But one of the things, if I was at Cubicle, where I'll be seriously driving, is to essentially not only just do the remittance thing, but add the whole basket in terms of product, and maybe even create an e-wallet on top of it. Because the most of these people go through the ones who actually remit money to Sri Lanka, they are low income earners, right? So I always envisioned e-commerce playing a role in helping them grow their money. So in terms of putting that in a wallet which will do work for them even though they are not. So you put that into some kind of saving schemes which gives them an interest rate. You give them complete transparency on terms of how that money is being spent. Currently they just move money and they say, here, relative, you do what you want with it. But the next step should be essentially saying, you know what, you can decide on what you do with your money. Don't depend on somebody in Sri Lanka to do it. So
thank you on that.
What first impression did you have of each other?
This is some real romantic stuff you're asking. Okay. My first impression, I thought these are real pandita. Right? And then I started to listen to what he says, and it was making sense. Right? Normally you have the panditayas who tell stuff that doesn't make sense. Then I started, actually every sentence that I heard from this guy's mouth made sense. So the panditaya piece went off and I became a fan.
My first impression of Dulith, I thought he was a lot taller than what I thought he was. I can remember thinking that. Because, remember like Cubicle we knew when I was in college, right? So we always knew how he looked like, but I was like, oh, he's taller. And I felt because he wears this suit, like I always was afraid of him. Like I feel suits are
It's a
like very
barrier.
professional stuff. It's a barrier thing. But he's obviously one of the friendliest people you'll ever meet. So, and who's always willing to help out. And actually, to be very honest, even when we were a 2 or 3 man team, he used to take phone calls from me. So I was very appreciative of that when he had time for people like us. When we were nobody. So I think that's essentially it.
What do you think of each other's ventures?
Okay, so I think Taka's venture, I give him so much credit for making it live this long, because I know how hard it is to really get into being in the categories that Lahiru is selling and being in business, because you need to raise money like almost every day. That's a lot of pressure, and he's not like the only founder as well. So in my case, I can shut the shop and go home kind of thing. So he I think the battle that Lahiru has played is a lot tougher than the battle that I had played in Cubicle. Yeah. So
in terms of the venture itself, listen, I mean, like Cubicle was in the business of e-commerce some way or the other long before anybody else, right? So that I think requires a certain degree of foresight and being brave, which is not available. And I can remember when Taka started, I mean, people thought we were like nuts. Like they said things like pyramid schemes and so on and so forth. So if you contextualize that to what Cubicle did and did it profitably, I mean, no amount of like words will essentially capture in terms of the respect we have for your business. I mean, sure, we are somehow competing and, we will say, oh, they should be doing this X, Y, and Z, but in essence, if you go to the nuts and bolts of it, to have a profitable e-commerce business is unheard of, especially in our markets. So that's how I feel about the venture he has started.
What do you feel about this program?
well, I think one main thing is I got very casual with Lahiru here, and we meet at very professional stuff. And just say we handshake and go home and meet after months and months. I think this became I got to mingle with him in a more relaxed way, and every question that you guys asked, I think we both were able to give very, very natural on the spot answers. We didn't really see these questions much beforehand or anything like that. It was very very authentic.
I would 100% agree. I mean, this is actually, we got to know a little bit more about one another. And I will walk away from this meeting having much better feelings about both Cubicle and Dulith in terms of, the affinity I have for the brand name as well as the man. And I hope that's maybe reciprocated some way or the other with me. And the other thing I felt, one of the more important things about this is, and I think the audience should know this, right? In order to build something, you can take many roads. Like it was, while we've done things very differently, right? This bootstrapped business, which is flourishing right now, we've essentially raised money from investors. We have different ethos in terms of getting to where we want to, and both are successes in their own light. So I think that's the great thing about this show, that, you brought these two individuals who's doing the same thing, but we're doing it very differently.
Right.